So, here's the building bridging part, right? So, what is Islam? Right? If you want to talk about Islam, first thing, we're not Islamic, we're Muslim. The people are called Muslims, right? And the religion is called Islam, right? People are like, are you Islamic? Well, I'm Muslim, right? You follow the Muslim faith? Well, Islam, yes. You know, it's like when you go to somebody from Mexico and you tell them, are you Spanish? Well, I speak Spanish. And you tell them, you speak Mexican? No, we got this all wrong, right? So the same thing happens with Muslims. People don't understand. So what is Islam? Islam is the religion itself, the name of the religion. Where does it come from? It comes from an Arabic root word. Arabic is a very interesting language. It always goes back to a trilateral root word, most cases. It comes from aslama, which means to submit or to surrender oneself. And aslama comes from the further root word of sin, lam, mim, salama. Salama is the root word for salam, for peace. So you can say Islam is that achievement of peace through submission to our Creator. The unique thing you will find about Islam, if we talk about Christianity, have you heard of the word Christianity? I'm just making sure you're awake, man. It's not one of those classes you can sleep through, right? What is it named after? All right, somebody, where's the A student here? Go ahead. Christ. For Mesa, you're an A student. Good. When you get to UCSD, then we'll talk. All right, so Christ. So before Christ, you couldn't have the word Christianity because it's named after Christ. Let's talk about Judaism, named after? This is pretty easy. Come on, guys. You're making your professor get uncomfortable. All right, Judaism, what is it named after? Judah. Right? Buddhism, named after? Buddha. Islam, not named after anybody. Because it's not a religion that started with a particular person. People say Islam began in the 6th century with Muhammad. That is totally incorrect, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Islam is the religion that is the name given to a religion of submitting yourself to your Creator. So Adam, as according to Islamic belief, was the first man. He was a Muslim. He followed the religion of Islam. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, peace be upon all of them, all prophets of God, all of them were Muslim. And that's why Islam is named not Muhammadism, because it didn't start with Muhammad, peace be upon him. It is the religion that was followed by all of the prophets, the righteous, from the beginning of time. It is also a complete way of life. What does that mean? Some people, they think religion is just what you do on the weekend. Like you go to a church on Sunday, or you go to the synagogue on Saturday, or you go to a mosque on Friday, and that's the religion. But that's not the way Islam works. Islam has everything in it. It has a penal code, meaning punishment of laws. It has a spiritual connect between you and your Creator. It has rights of worship. It has an infrastructure to take care of the poor, which we call zakat, and we'll discuss about. So it's a complete way of life. What you do when you first wake up in the morning, how you treat your neighbors, how you deal with the government, how you deal with your children, how do you deal with inheritance, all of that is within the religion of Islam. All right, when we talk about Islam, the first thing we need to talk about is Allah. When I was in elementary school here in San Diego, they had a book, Wilson Middle, so Alice Birdie Elementary School. And it said, Allah, the Muslim God, as if we have some proprietary God just for us. That's not what it is. Allah is not the Muslim God. Allah is an Arabic word coming from al-ilah, which means the only God. Yani, in Islam, the idea is that our Creator is one Creator. There's only one. There's not, monkeys and this and that. It's just one God, one Creator that we worship. And that's what the word Allah means. We don't know just one name for Allah. We know many. For example, in the Islamic tradition, we have 114 different names in the Quran and authentic narrations to get to know our Creator. And there are other names that we don't know, that maybe the other traditions before knew, or in other languages. So you can know your Creator through many names. Allah is only one of those names. We use the word Allah because it is a very deep word. for example, the word God. You use the word God, right? What gender would that word have? Would it be male? Would it be female? Male, right? So if it was a female, what would it be? Come on, you're on a roll. Come on, bro. Let's keep going. There you go. Right? So if it's a male, it's God. If it's a female, it's goddess. So when you say God, you are insinuating that God's a man, right? But the word Allah has no gender, right? If you have a God, you can have godlings, right? You can use the word God for other than the creator. You can say, that guy is the God of basketball, something that was never said about me. So you can say somebody's the God of rock and roll, or this or that, right? But the word Allah cannot be used except for that one sole creator, right? So this is a very unique word representing the sole deity, the only one that's worthy of worship. It was used by Jesus himself. If you look at the Aramaic words used, ilah, it comes from the same word. If you look at the Bible, and you look at the original writings, and even if you look at Arabic Bible, if you go back to the references that I've given, and I can give you a copy of the PowerPoint, you will find the word ilah or Allah being used in the earlier faiths as well. It's not a man, it's not a woman, it's not an idol, it's not a created being. Allah is the creator of everything. But He's not a man, it's not a cow, not a statue. This is something unique that you find about Allah. When you talk about the religion of Islam, then you have to talk about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we as Muslims mention any prophet, then we, out of respect, we say, peace be upon them, right? And this is a unique thing to understand, because you may have seen there were people making drawings of the Prophet Muhammad, right? Cartoon characters, just very disrespectful, right? You saw it in the news? No? Don't watch the news? No? All right, good. All right, right? But you will never find a Muslim making fun of Jesus. Never. Think about it. Go back in your database of a mind and history. You will not find a Muslim making fun of Jesus or Moses or Abraham, because as Muslims, we are obligated to respect all of those prophets. In the Quran, it tells us that we believe in all of them equally. We don't differentiate. We don't say, I believe in Muhammad, but I don't believe in Jesus. We can't do that. You're not a Muslim if you do that. You have to believe in all of them. You have to treat them with respect. You will never see a Muslim burning a Bible. You've seen people burning the Quran, and guys in whatever, somewhere in the south, him and his sister that he's married to, trying to burn the Qurans, putting together, right? But have you ever seen a Muslim take a Bible or a Torah and burn it? Never. Even if we believe that it has been tampered with, we respect those books. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the authentic narration, when he came to visit some people of Jewish faith, and they brought the Torah, the Old Testament, and they put it on the floor. He was sitting on a pillow. He got up, he took the pillow, he took the Torah, and he put it on the pillow. Himself sat on the ground, respected the Jewish book, to say that this has some of the words of God still in it, to show that kind of respect. So when we mention prophets, I'm going to say, peace be upon them. This is just for you to understand. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came from a society, and you have to look at things in a historic perspective, right? Because if you take somebody from a different time period and try to judge them according to the standards of your time period, it doesn't come out right. For example, if one of you owned a slave today, would we find that acceptable? What do you think? No? Maybe? Depends who it was? No? All right. Anybody find that acceptable? Would you honor such a person? Would you put his face on a dollar bill? But you do. Anybody have a dollar bill? No? You're broke students? No, just kidding. All right. So, George Washington owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Right? So, you are, in fact, naming universities and schools and streets and after a slave owner. Right? Why? Because immediately people say, oh, wait, because at that time that was the norm, so it was all right. Not how that works, but okay. But anyway, point being that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he came in a society where there were no rights for women. Arab society had absolutely no rights. to the extent that if they had a female child that was born, they would bury them alive. Not all of them, obviously society would stop, but out of trying to show their, I don't know, some weird idea of manlyhood, if they had a female child, they would bury them. Now, that sounds horrible, right? But it happens today. In China, in India, there are places when they have a female child that's in the womb, they abort the fetus. There are little villages in India that are called man villages because there's so few women there now, right? Which is a horrible place to live for me, but anyway. So, point being, this is the kind of society that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came with, and he transformed that society to a society that had officially protected rights for women, including rights of inheritance, right to own property, operate businesses, dispose of their earnings as they wished, and the practice of burying female children was abolished not by the UN and not by the Human Rights Council, but by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, due to revelation in the Quran from Allah. He came to a society with no rights for minorities. Non-Arabs, people that were not from a strong tribal background, the poor had absolutely no rights. And he transformed that society to a society that was virtually free from discrimination. Again, humans always have bias and prejudice, but if you look at the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, you will find from them people that used to be slaves like Bilal al-Habashi, who was ruling over huge lands like the place of Sham, which is Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine today. So you went from a society where a person, if they weren't from a strong Arabic heritage, you could kill them and there would be no consequences, to a society where anybody who was qualified would be a leader without even looking at their race. And that's something that we struggle with today even. Obama happened once, but we'll see how it goes. See what happened afterwards, right? If we look at the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we find in the authentic narrations that, O people, your Lord, and Allah, is one Lord. And you all share the same Father. There is no preference of the Arab over the non-Arab, nor for the non-Arab over the Arabs. Neither is there preference for white over the black, nor the black over the white. Preference is only through righteousness. Right? And this is more than 1400 years ago. And if you think that we're past that today, we hear Donald Trump saying, we don't want immigrants from those bleep, bleep holes. I'm not going to use bad words here, right? We want immigrants from Norway. Well, why Norway? Because they're white. You don't want immigrants from Mexico. You don't want immigrants from Muslim countries. You don't want immigrants from Africa. You want immigrants from white countries. Why? Because of that clear prejudice that is unfiltered till today. But we see the opposite message being taught by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. When you talk about the religion of Islam, we have to talk about the Quran. The Quran is, according to Islamic belief, the words of Allah, as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Right? The Quran was not written by the Prophet Muhammad, and I can prove that. How? He couldn't write. Right? It's very difficult for you to write something if you're unable to write. According to historians across the board, if you go to Orientalists or if you go to Islamic historians, Christian historians, across the board there is a consensus that he was unlettered, illiterate, could not read or write. So a man who can't read and write obviously can't write a book that would have scientific facts, that would have the rules of all Arabic grammar to come, that would have predictions that would be coming true in the later times after his death, like for example about the battles between Persians and Romans and who would win, and all of this, and historic facts that were unknown to the Arabs of the time. Right? So a non-biased review of the Quran. For example, Dr. Maurice Bucaille, he was a French scientist, you can Google him, and he set out to prove that religion is not compatible with science. Right? He was an atheist. So he set out with the Bible first. He took the Bible and he reviewed the creation of humanity and other facts that are in the Bible, that are claimed to be facts in the Bible, in the New Testament. And he reviewed them against scientific, proven, clinically trialed, proven facts. And he found that the Old Testament and the New Testament were not compatible. And he presented his research to the Scientific Academy, whatever, got standing ovations and great job. And he said, I'm on a roll, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do the Quran next. And then he went to the Quran. And he was an atheist. And his review of the Qur'an led to him becoming a Muslim. And he wrote a book. It's called The Bible, the Qur'an, and Science. He put the Bible first because that's what he studied the first. And it's available. You can get it online. You can order it. You can get a PDF. But he writes, a total objective examination of it in the Qur'an in the light of modern knowledge leads us to recognize the agreement between the two, modern knowledge and the Qur'an. As has been already noted and repeated occasions, that's in his book, it makes us to deem it quite unthinkable for a man of Muhammad's time to have been the author of such statements, on the account of the state of knowledge in his day. Such considerations are a part of what gives the Quranic revelation its unique place and forces the impartial scientist to admit its inability to prove an explanation which calls solely upon materialistic reasoning. So he says that if you look at the Qur'an and you look at the facts that are stated in it, scientific facts about how the salt water and sweet water mix, touch but don't mix, things that a man like Muhammad could not have known because he hadn't even been to those places. Facts about how the child develops in the womb of the mother, things that would not be known for hundreds of years to come. Things about how planets have their orbits, things that the Arabian society had no idea about. Even the most educated of the Arabian society at the time didn't know any of these. For a man who could not have found those facts, it says that an objective examination shows that this is of divine origin. Now, I like to play some games. We have fact versus fiction, right? We hear on many times on Fox News and places like that the Qur'an calls to kill innocent people, right? You've heard it before, you know. So let's look at facts. In the Qur'an, it says, and prepare against them whatever you are able of power and steeds of war, by which you may terrify the enemy of Allah and your enemy. Now, just there, you're like, wait a minute, he's going against his own point, right? Right? But that's because I don't like to cut and paste. I like to present the entire picture. What's being hidden is, this is fiction. Why? Because this verse, chapter 8, verse number 60, is followed by chapter 8, verse number, keeping you awake, come on, right? Stay with me. 61, obviously it comes after 68. What does it say? And if they incline towards peace, then incline towards it also, and rely upon Allah. Indeed, He is the hearing and knowing. So what does it tell you? That if somebody attacks you, if somebody is killing you, if somebody is harming you, then prepare against them, defend yourself. But if they incline towards peace, then that's what you should incline towards. But what happens is these right-wing talk show radios, what do? They clip, they cut and paste. They take a part, they don't tell you the whole. And if you do that with any book, you can find many misinterpretations. For example, just to give you an example, to be fair, this is from the Bible, the New Testament, Matthew, not the Old Testament, not getting Old Testament on you. Matthew 10:34. Do not think, this is supposedly, as in the Bible, the words of Jesus, peace be upon him. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth, but I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. In Luke 19:27, look up the verses yourself, you can write it down. But as for these enemies of mine, Jesus says, for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me. Could these verses be taken out of context and used for violent acts? It's been done. You know, Hitler used these verses. Google it. Used the Bible in his speeches. He used that ideology. Have you heard of an organization called the KKK? Anybody? Raise up hands. The president hasn't, but apparently you have. All right. So, the KKK, what do they burn on your front lawn? A what? A cross. They have their own Bible studies, they have their own churches, right? So, could this be used? Yes. Have verses from the Qur'an been misused to justify acts of violence? Sure. But if we're going to be honest, then we need to look at the message itself. We don't take these verses out of context. We need to look at the context in the biblical sense. And we look at the verse from the Qur'an, we need to look at the context in the Qur'an as well. We hear that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam spread Islam with a sword. Right? I don't know if it's like a bagel or something. Again, it's fiction. And I'll bring you a quote from a gentleman. Anybody recognize him? Come on, man. You guys, I know Mesa, but still Gandhi. All right, there you go. All right. He wrote in his book, Young India, after reading about Muhammad, peace be upon him, I became more than convinced that it was not the sword that won a place for Islam. It was the rigid simplicity, the utter humbleness of the Prophet, the meticulous regard for honoring pledges, his valor in the face of oppression, his fearlessness in speaking against injustice, his absolute trust in God and in his own mission that spread Islam. Islam can't be forced. It's impossible. Why? Because Islam begins in the heart. If I bring a gun to you and put it on your head and tell you, become Muslim, and you're like, all right, I'm Muslim, you're not Muslim. That's not what Muslims believe. Muslims believe Islam begins in the heart, the belief, and then testimony comes on the tongue, and its fruits are seen in actions. So you can't force somebody to become Muslim. When Muslims ruled Spain for hundreds of years, they didn't force the Catholics and people of Jewish heritage there to convert to Islam. Historically, look it up. When the Europeans took Spain from the Moors, they had something called the Spanish Inquisition. All right, no history majors here, it's all right. Yeah. So, what was the Spanish Inquisition? When they took Spain from the Moors, they went and said, if you don't believe in our strand of Catholic Christian faith, Catholic, a particular strand, even if you're a different Christian, you were killed. If you were Jewish, you were killed, tortured to convert or killed. If you were Muslim, you were tortured to convert or killed. Spanish Inquisition, Google it. When Salahuddin Ayyubi ruled over Palestine, right? When he had Al-Aqsa, he allowed Christians to practice their faith, to have their churches. He allowed synagogues to function and have their worship. When the Crusaders would take Jerusalem, what they did, you can Google yourself. So this is something, again, you find as fiction. So what are the teachings of Islam? Obviously, we would need a lot of time to cover the entire religion, years and years of study, but I'll go over some of the basics. The 5 pillars, the basics. The first, what we call the shahadatain, the two shahada, which is where you testify. This is the beginning of Islam. You testify with the belief in heart and testimony on the tongue that there is none worthy of worship except Allah, that you don't worship anything else. That's a core belief in Islam. We don't worship the Kaaba in Mecca. We don't worship Muhammad, peace be upon him. We don't worship saints. We don't worship graves. We don't worship anything but that one sole creator. Uniquely monotheistic. And you believe in Muhammad as the messenger of God. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We believe in praying 5 times a day. That's one of the core beliefs of the Muslim. And if you see one of us praying, bowing, not going to blow anything up, relax, just praying, all right? So you should get to know this because, you know, you got Muslims here, prayer time comes in, they might be praying in the parking lot and you're freaking out. So, you know, it's a part of every Muslim's daily practice to pray 5 times a day. Is it difficult? Not really, right? The prayer takes, depending on the prayer, between 3, 4 to maybe 5, 6 minutes, the actual fard of it itself. And you have it 5 times a day, but you have big windows where you can pray it. So, for example, the morning prayer, let's say, for example, it comes in around 4:30 a.m. and you have till around 6:30 a.m. to pray it. So you've got that window to pray, you know, it takes you a few minutes. So you have, it's very practical. It's not like, you know, it's rigid where you have to pray between 4:04 and 4:05. It's not like that. So there are 5 daily prayers, and they're a great reminder, a great spiritual reminder. Because sometimes you kind of go through your day and you start losing your track and you start thinking about cheating on that test, and then you go and you pray and you think, you know what, I'm not going to do all that, I gotta go study instead, and it kind of brings you back on track. We believe in paying zakat. Zakat is not a tax, it is what you give to the poor. It's 2.5% of your savings. So it's not your earnings. Like in the, for example, in the Mormon tradition, they give 10% of their gross earnings. But that's different. In Islam, you may earn a lot of money, but then you may have a lot of expenses. You may have children, you may have college tuition fees, you know, and it gets all spent, and then you don't pay zakat. But if you have earnings for over a year, that money is sitting, and it's over a certain amount, then only 2.5% of it. So in $100, would that be $2.50, right? Math majors, right? So you give that to who? Not the mosque, not the imam, not a priest, you give that to the poor, to the needy, those that are in need of it. Why? Because we don't want to just take zakat and put it towards, as our taxes go towards, paying Lockheed Martin or one of these, Bay systems to make bombs and kill people. That's not the way. Zakat has to go to the needy. Because there are people that are struggling. There are people who need that help. And if you got money that's just sitting there for over a year, and it's a large amount of wealth, then it's upon you to share that. Right? And that's what every Muslim does. We have fasting. And the month of Ramadan is coming up soon, inshallah, by the will of Allah. And this is a month we fast. We fast from sunrise to sunset. That means from early AM when the sun begins to rise until it starts to set, we fast. We fast a month, but as I said, it's from sunrise to sunset. We eat and drink at night, right? But in the daytime, no food, no water, no spousal relations, no distractions, a spiritual and physical cleanse. And we all know about the physical benefits of fasting and how it cleanses the body from toxins and things, but there is also the spiritual benefit that you benefit from. And another benefit of fasting is you realize the hardships the poor around the world are going through. Like, we're fasting voluntarily. We got food in the US, right? Maybe a little too much food, but that's a different issue. So when we don't eat all day or don't drink all day in Ramadan, we start to think about those people in other countries, in Africa, in China, in India, who don't have food, who don't have clean water source to drink from. So you start feeling their pain. You start actually going through that. And when you eat, you think about the pleasure you get by eating at the end of the day, and you think about how you should give charity to help those people get that pleasure by getting food, because they're unable to eat even if they're not fasting. So that's a great lesson we learned from Ramadan. The last, and none of them are the least, is the Hajj, or the pilgrimage to Mecca. It is undertaken by every Muslim, male and female, at least once in a lifetime if they are able to. Meaning, if you're physically unable to go, you don't have to go. Islam never puts a burden upon anybody more than they can handle. If you're financially not able to go, you don't have to go. If you have some other legitimate reason holding you back, you don't have to go. But if you're able to, at least once in a lifetime, we travel to Mecca. And we go there during the time for Hajj, and we perform the rituals that were performed by the prophets before us. So you will go and stand where Abraham stood. You will go where the mother of Ishmael, Hajar, she ran, and where Ishmael was, and where the water of Zamzam came. And I don't have time to get into each one of those, but to understand the earlier traditions. And there's a great lesson, because men there, they only wear 2 pieces of white, usually white, unstitched cloth, right? So right now, somebody may be sporting Gucci, and somebody else Versace, and somebody may have the Kmart brand or whatever, and you start to become, in a social pecking order, right? Like, I'm wearing this, and you're wearing that, and your clothes represent you to be from this place and that. But you get away from all of that in Hajj. You're wearing the same things, you're going through the same ritual. You could be a king, or you could be, a bum. You're all going to go through the same rituals at the same time. And it puts you in that mindset that we are one big human family. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what background you have. We're all going through the same things in life. And it reminds you of the one message that was brought with all the prophets. You look at where Abraham and Moses and others, they were, and the pilgrimages they performed in the same places. You will go, and this is where Abraham stood, and this is where Ishmael stood, and you realize that all of those prophets brought one message. So this is the basics. I will open it up for our young gentleman to speak first, and then question and answer after that, I believe.